Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me today. This is going to be our fourth video in our series on homosexuality, and we're going to begin looking at the biblical passages that are often used to condemn homosexuality. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and share this video, talk to me in the comments, and check out my description box for links to my Facebook, Instagram, discussion group, Patreon, and the introduction to my free class, See the Creator, which will premiere on July 26th here on my channel. First, I'm going to be upfront and say that the Bible has been used to marginalize and mistreat groups of people, including the LGBTQ community. And if I thought that the teachings of the Bible condoned that type of behavior, I would reject the Bible as wrong. To some of you, that will make my opinion unreliable, and that's okay. That's just me being upfront with you. My morality is love your neighbor, and I see this as the underlying truth of all of the world's major religions, holy books, and mystical experiences. And I don't think that we need one specific book to tell us right from wrong. However, I do not believe that the Bible condemns homosexuality as wrong. And I do believe, as I stated, that the underlying message of the Bible is God is one, love your neighbor as yourself. Second, I am not a Bible scholar. I am just a person who is very passionate about spiritual topics and spends hours researching these things with the same tools that all of us have available to us. Having said that, let's move into the biblical passages that seem to condemn homosexuality at a first glance. In case you missed it, in episode 3 of this series, we looked at the Sodom and Gomorrah passages. In this video, we will look at 3 more Old Testament passages. The first 2 are found in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13 say basically the same thing. Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. Leviticus 18:22. And if a man has sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. Leviticus 20, verse 13. In my personal experience, these are the 2 passages that are brought up the most often to condemn the LGBTQ community. People will often just drop these passages in the comment sections of my video with no explanation or commentary, as if these passages are a convincing argument all on their own. But the first thing that I want to point out about these Levitical passages is that the average mainstream Christian does not believe that we follow the Levitical law anymore. Let me illustrate why. If we're going to condemn homosexuality as sin based on passages found in Leviticus, then we must also condemn as sin not keeping the Sabbath. That means that you don't do anything on Saturday, including preparing food or going for a walk. If you have a garden or fruit trees on your property, harvesting to the edge of your garden or everything on your tree is a sin. You are required to leave some for the poor and needy to harvest after you. Planting a field with 2 types of crops or wearing a garment with 2 types of fabric is a sin. Eating off of a fruit tree within the first 4 years of its planting. Cutting the hair at the sides of your head or clipping the edges of your beard. Getting tattoos. Eating unclean birds and animals. This one is hard for me to even read because it is so wrong. But anyone who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed, has a crippled foot or hand, a hunchback, a dwarf, or anyone with an eye defect, among other physical ailments, was not allowed to give an offering. So if you wear glasses and you give an offering, then you're a sinner, according to Leviticus. That's just a start, but enough to get the point across. Now, I'll be the first to say there's a lot of good in the Levitical laws as well. People were commanded to take care of the poor and needy, respect their elders, not to hate anyone in their hearts, and not to slander or bear false witness against their neighbor. So when you look at the Levitical law, you have to somehow be able to draw out what is actually the gold, the move of God that they were experiencing for that time, and what is all the extraneous stuff that was their interpretation. There's a couple of things to keep in mind. First, people imagine that the Old Testament law was given from the mouth of God. Therefore, every word of the law was a direct requirement from God. And this just isn't the case. What we have in Leviticus is a record of the civil and ceremonial laws of an ancient culture. It's their understanding of right and wrong in comparison to, oftentimes, the surrounding cultures. It is them figuring out how to make society run smoothly, and they, like every society surrounding them, through lots, performed sacred rituals, interpreted signs and symbols, and attributed the answers that they received to their God. Second, many of these ancient laws are steeped in cultural tradition that we have no idea of today. From what I can tell, one of the main purposes of their system of laws was to set them apart from the Canaanites. And Christianity, of course, has said this is because God hated the Canaanites, and the Israelites were God's chosen people, and they were supposed to be set apart. But realistically, it was because the ancient Hebrews were reacting to the way the Canaanites lived their lives. Now, granted, some of what the Canaanites were doing was pretty barbaric, and many of the Old Testament laws were a reaction to this. And this is where I do think that the ancient Hebrews received a genuine divine revelation, which they took and incorporated into their culture and added to based on their own understanding, just as any people of any time does. For instance, the law against getting tattoos is lumped together with a law against cutting yourself for the dead. Clearly, this is a very different thing than our understanding of going out and getting a tattoo. Likely what was being condemned was a ritual practice connected with cult worship, otherwise known in the Old Testament as idol worship. What many people don't understand is that idol worship was so prohibited in the Old Testament, not simply because people were worshiping a false god. Although this is probably part of it, because one of the major revelations that was the foundation of the Hebrew faith is God is one. But the reason why idol worship was so prohibited is because of the cult rituals surrounding idol worship that occurred in the native tribes. People cut themselves to appease their gods or in mourning for the dead. They also tattooed their bodies in mourning for the dead or to identify with a specific cult. Child sacrifice was performed in some cults, specifically those related to Moloch. But what was particularly common and called out over and over again in the Old Testament is temple prostitution. Before the emergence of the Abrahamic religions on the ancient scene, Judaism followed by Christianity and Islam, which are patriarchal in nature and focused on the divine masculine, the ancient pagan religions revolved around nature and agriculture. The divine feminine was emulated, and worship revolved around feminine aspects of the womb, fertility. So a huge part of their worship was fertility cults. Men would seek out either male or female temple prostitutes in order to pass on their seed and ensure a fertile harvest for their family. This is what Asherah worship was all about, and temple prostitution is what occurred at the Asherah poles and high places mentioned in the Old Testament, and this is why it was so forbidden. Deuteronomy 23:17, the third passage that I want to address in this video, is specifically dealing with fertility cults. In this passage, several versions of the Bible use the word sodomite. The NASB translates it this way: "There shall be no prostitute of the daughters of Israel, neither shall there be a sodomite of the sons of Israel." But the Hebrew words translated sodomite and prostitute here are Kadesh and Kadesha, 6945 and 6948 in Strong's Concordance respectively. And Kadesh means a sacred person, a male or female in the case of Kadesha, devotee by prostitution to licentious idolatry. So the root of the word is sacred, a person set apart to ritualistic religious prostitution. The NIV translates this passage accurately. No Israelite man or woman is to become a shrine prostitute. And the NLT, no Israelite, whether man or woman, may become a temple prostitute. Was homosexuality involved here? Most likely, there were male and female temple prostitutes. However, in this passage, we don't see the men involved in these practices being condemned any more harshly than the women, and so we can conclude that it was the act of religious prostitution that was being called out. It is the religious oppression involved in owning sex slaves, basically, that is being called out as wrong. Moving back to the Leviticus passages. Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. Let's look at the Hebrew words translated here, man, woman, and detestable. First, the word translated detestable is toeba, Strong's 8441. And the meaning of this word is something disgusting and abhorrent, especially idolatry or an idol. So if you do a word search on toeba, it is not used exclusively in relation to idolatry, but overwhelmingly it is used in the context of idolatry or some ritual performed in cult worship. And so perhaps the text would be better translated, do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is idolatry. Why is it idolatry to have sex with a man as one does with a woman? Well, there are two potential reasons. First, because temple prostitution is the primary place where you find men having sex with men. And again, temple prostitution is likely what is being condemned here. Second, I have to give credit to Reverend Sam Kader of the Hope Tapes for pointing this out. But when I did the research for myself, I found what he said to be accurate. The second word used for man here is not ish, which is the general Hebrew word for man. It is zakar, which means someone important, someone to be remembered. In Leviticus 20:13, where it says, if a man has sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. In Hebrew it says, if a man, ish, general word for man, has sexual relations with a man, zakar, someone to be remembered, as one does with a woman, isha, general word for woman, both of them have done what is detestable, toeba, idolatry. Keep in mind that in this culture, women were considered to be property, so men would assert their power and their dominance over women. So what this is saying is not that if your average nameless man sleeps with another average nameless man, that this is detestable or this is idolatry. It's saying that when you take an important person and a person to be remembered and you humiliate and degrade them by asserting your dominance over them as you would when you sleep with a woman, this is detestable. This is idolatry. Why was it idolatry? Because this is exactly what the Canaanite nations would do in service to their gods. When they won in battle, they would take the king and they would humiliate him by raping him in service to their gods. There is a lot about these ancient cultures that have been lost to time. There's a lot that we don't know, historically speaking, about the ancient Hebrews and the surrounding nations. However, I think there is enough information available to show that homosexuality, as we understand it today, between two loving individuals in a consensual relationship was not condemned, because it's not even mentioned. There are only a handful of passages where men sleeping with men are mentioned in the entire Bible, and even less where women sleeping with women are mentioned. I think there's one in the book of Romans. Only a handful compared to the dozens and dozens of other passages that deal with far more pressing issues of taking care of the poor and needy, not shedding innocent blood, not bearing false witness. Doing a 20-second Bible Gateway search You can find more than 50 passages in the Old Testament on how to treat the poor and needy, compared with 3 that talk about men sleeping with men. And all 3 of these passages are dealing with specific situations that were used to degrade and humiliate people. And this is the primary sin condemned throughout the entire Bible: mistreatment of others and misuse of power. Using the name of God to oppress people is the primary sin condemned throughout the Bible. And I believe this is what is being condemned again in these 3 passages. But using the name of the divine being that you are worshiping and the power and privilege that affords you to use and take advantage of people. In closing, there is no question about what is considered detestable or idolatry to God. And it's when we mistreat people, especially using our religious power and privilege to do so. And so those who are so adamant that they must call out the LGBTQ community as sinners need to check their own hearts and make sure that they are not committing the sin of marginalization, mistreatment, and religious oppression of people in the name of their God. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.